All right. Looks like it's February 6th, 2024. Um, Welcome to everyone. Um, our usual Tuesday morning class, and just for you to know that this Friday evening is the Spirit Rock monthly class that I teach. So if you're interested, that starts at 7:15 Pacific time. And what else? Our retreat is pretty full. There's a few spots open. So if you're interested in joining the retreat, February 27th to March 3rd, there's information on my website. And other than that, nothing coming up until April. Going to do a class series in San Francisco in April. So there's that.
Okay. We're doing a day long on March 16th.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Anne. There you go. So Santa Cruz, Insight Santa Cruz. I know I need to keep my calendar in front of me. What am I doing today? Oh, wait. Yeah, that's very cool. Haven't been to Santa Cruz to teach in quite a while, and very nice to be able to share that with you, and that'll be fun. I'm a little energetically depleted, which feels completely psychic because I have not been using any physical energy. So anyway, I will try to, carry the class, but I may depend upon you guys to carry me instead today. We never know. We're all in this together. So, but let's start with some sitting, and I will give some general meditation instruction and get you guys going. Kind of give you a little push out into the lake, meditation lake. Or just settling back into your posture. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And feeling how you're holding your body. So any adjustments to help you to be more in balance. Feeling the breath moving through the body. And also just checking in with your current mind state, mood, energy. How are you? How are you feeling on all those levels? And just acknowledging that, holding that with kindness, with openness. And keeping awareness of the breath, even as you notice and check in with other aspects of your experience. We don't have to block anything out, to just focus exclusively on the breath. In fact, it's more natural, really, to feel the breath along with other aspects of experience. This is how we develop our practice into something natural, organic, just a presence, being here with things as they are, not trying to create some special state or arouse special feelings, but just being at ease with things as they are. The breath acts as a kind of through line to our awareness, something we can always be aware of, be sensitive to. And it also helps us to calm the body and mind, to be aware of the breath. It's another natural element of this practice. We don't have to try to suppress anything. Get rid of stress, get rid of some feeling. Just keep a degree of attention on the breath. Even as the breath continuously changes in and out, deeper, shallower, so too the other aspects of experience, feeling, mood, sensations, thoughts. These too are always changing. We are just watching this flow of experience, noticing the reactions that come to experience, the liking or disliking, the wanting to change, just observing all of this as we breathe in and breathe out. There's often an impulse to figure out why we are feeling something or thinking something. And this throws us into proliferation, thoughts, an endless self-examination. Not to say that there isn't some value in analyzing our experience, but in meditation, we try to let go of that, at least for a time. Just be with experience. The tendency to analyze quickly takes us away from the direct experience. It's a kind of avoidance that's masked as something helpful. If I can figure this out, then it will be solved. That's the illusion. But as we watch that play out, we quickly realize thinking about the mind or thinking about experience just generates more thinking, often more agitation. And so we step back to the simple awareness of experience, aware of the senses, aware of the mood, aware of the thoughts themselves. All right. Once again, good day, good morning, afternoon, or evening. Ah, well, um, you rarely see me at a loss for words. Um, I guess I'll tell you what I was thinking about. So, uh, although I couldn't, we'll see, where it goes. Just thinking, I'm sure many of you, like me, kind of read the articles that come out in the media about addiction, about recovery. And, it's something that is very kind of, it's one of those topics that the journalists, I think, like to come back to because there's always something sort of new or different. And, there's some drama in it. And certainly, one of the things that I've observed over the years is the persistence of uh, attempts to discredit the 12 steps and 12-step programs as, as effective tools for recovery and dealing with addiction. Um, there's a little bit less of that now, but I'm sure many of you have noticed the current trend of articles about so-called plant medicine and how that's the sort of latest thing. And it just got me thinking about, some of you have been around a long time like me, When I got sober in 1985, uh, there was stuff going on in the addiction world. I wasn't particularly paying attention to it, but occasionally I'd become aware of things I think it's around then that some of the sort of alternative programs started to arise and just it's kind of interesting just to look at the arc of the history of addiction. It's just and I mean you can go back a long way. In fact, there's a book, I can't think of it, but I'm the author connected with me when he was working on it. Try to think of it. That's like the history of addiction and the history of people dealing with it. But just starting with the 1930s and the arising of the 12-step movement, and seeing that even by the 1950s, you had people starting to try to use experimenting with LSD as a treatment, right? And I think I may have told some of you that my first psychiatrist when I was 14, he yes, I started seeing a psychiatrist when I was 14. Anyway, it's not a surprise. I came from a family of people who went to see psychiatrists and back in that day when that was like the thing to do. In any case, he was sober and he had been an ear, nose, and throat doctor and then hit bottom and went back to school and got a degree in counseling. And anyway, that's 1964, and he was running the addiction treatment program at the Norristown State Hospital in Pennsylvania. And at the time, he was treating people with LSD. It was legal at that time. And and this was an idea, and it's interesting that it's back. Uh, very persistent. But Dr. Unext, he was a dear, dear, dear man. And he told me, well, when you turn 18, I'll I'll take you through an LSD trip. I mean, this is 1964, so this is before we knew anything about it, right? It wasn't in the popular culture the way it became within 2 years from that. Unfortunately, I stopped seeing him after a couple of years, and then I had went off to a mental hospital, and the next time I saw him, he was a patient at another mental hospital. I was visiting a friend at it's like a mental hospital time of my life anyway. And apparently eventually he committed suicide. So I don't know, it didn't work. Anyway, that's a dreary story. Talk to you next. Um, in any case, you know what? When I got sober, I think that AA was already in transition, 1985, because, the founders of AA were these, like these Wall Street types and business people and very straight white folks, men. And by 1985, you're having this new generation, right? All the hippies who had like blown themselves up in the 60s and 70s were like, oh, maybe I need to get sober and started coming to AA. And of course, they started to change the culture of AA. So it was definitely a transitional time when you still had a very strong, like traditional hardcore, tough love kind of AA vibe. But and where I got sober was, the Venice Beach, it's a lot of artists and musicians and film people and a lot of probably atheists or like, people who weren't really totally on board with the whole God thing. And so I didn't feel the kind of pressure that I've seen when I've gone to some meetings in other parts of the country. And but what again, just how the culture changed. In the late 80s, you started to have the big like inner child movement, right? So John Bradshaw, and this was like, ACA, adult children of alcoholics, everybody was like sort of seeing, oh, well, I'm alcoholic, but it's really because I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. And it was this thing of like trying to expand on the idea of sobriety and like not let it, it's sort of a rebellion against the tough love aspect of it, bringing in something softer. Uh, but again, just sort of like the culture starts to change. And so over these years, you see these shifts, and certainly we and I are part of another shift. It'll be this June, it'll be 20 years since One Breath at a Time was published. And at the time that came out, there was very little thought that Buddhism or even mindfulness would be part of the recovery movement. There was one meeting at the San Francisco Zen Center on Monday nights, which still is there, and that started around 2002, I think a couple of years before that. But mostly the response I got from people was thank God. Well, maybe not the right word, but thank you for writing this. Like I've been looking for something like this. I needed something like this, right? And that's very striking. I think, it shocked me, frankly, the response that came when I started to go out and when this book came out, when I started to go out and teach, to find that there was this apparently kind of simmering uh, wish, a longing for some alternative way to work with the 12 steps that people were trying to find. And I wound up, being a avatar for that, I suppose. I don't even know what avatar means, but it seems like it fits in there somewhere. And but as I say, then that's part of, I think what we are doing is also part of a larger movement of somewhat, well, there's the challenging the abstinence model, challenging the 12-step model. Um, Now the trauma is the cause of all addiction now. We've learned it's not being an adult child of alcoholics or whatever, or just that you're an alcoholic, you know. Um, so, we see these changes, and it's just and of course there's one of the threads that runs through the whole history of recovery is trying to find a medical solution, the medical model, right? And we see that particularly with methadone and Suboxone for opiate addictions. But we could say that in some sense the plant medicine and psychedelics are sort of like the far edge of that idea that we're going to find some magic mushroom, right? Something that's going to be the cure, right? Which is, I think, part of this too, isn't it? There is a longing for a cure, and I think that my sense is that the mainstream culture that isn't involved in addiction and recovery thinks that abstinence is a curse, and that they'd like to free you from that curse, and they're going to find a drug for you or a cure for you so that you won't be cursed with that condition where you can't drink. That's terrible. I'm so sad. I feel so bad for you that you can't drink, Here, we're going to give you a drug that'll make it so you can drink. And of course, they're missing the beautiful spiritual quality, the spiritual awakening, the richness of sobriety, which of course is what ties us then to this other model, the the Buddhist model, right? The Buddhist model, which is one of, no, we're not trying to escape anything. We're not trying to get away from anything. We're trying to go deeper into what it is. Oh, you're an addict? Oh, good. Let's see what that is. Let's see how that feels. Let's see how you wake up today. How is it to be an addict right now? How is that? Okay, breathe with that, It's not an escape. It's an embracing of it. And obviously not embracing in that we like it or that we want to sustain it, but it's not fearful and it's not aversive. You know, um, Addiction is just a human condition. It's just you know, an extreme of the human habit of grasping. And, there are people who don't have that habit to a level that it becomes really painful. So they go along through life thinking that they're fine, you know, that they don't have to, they're so glad they don't have that problem that you people have, right? And yet, of course, they do. Everyone has this problem. Everyone has greed, hatred, and delusion as a problem. And the question is whether you are, you know, confronting it, being with it, allowing it, learning to to hold it and potentially, through deeply touching and holding it, being able to let it go and move into a different relationship with it. Or whether you're just going to kind of, you know, go along to get along kind of it through life and think that, oh, it's really, you know, I can control this, I can stay on top of this. You know. but the phrase, grateful alcoholic, right, is right at what what really expresses this, right? The realization that sobriety has brought you in touch with a uh, another way of being and another way of living that's far more gratifying and fulfilling and complete than uh, the life of, the life of trying to hold everything together, control everything. I see Jonathan has, yes, the commenting about it's called psychedelics in recovery, I believe. I have a good friend who's one of the was involved in sort of founding that group. If you're I'm looking at the chat, so just look at the chat if you want to know what I'm talking about. That a 12-step group that's like, yeah, and we trip, but okay, sure. I mean, why not? And my friend has become completely disillusioned with that program. He is very involved in it and actually has done a lot of research uh, into psychedelics, both in the traditional sense of research and in the personal sense of research. And he's just, seen that uh, everybody he's seen in that program has relapsed on not on psychedelics, on the more dangerous alcohol and opioids and things. Not to, and I shouldn't paint that with a broad stroke. I'm sure for some people that works. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I imagine, uh, you know, there's a lot of ways, and that's despite my own preference and bias toward abstinence. I do believe that some people can, some heroin addicts can wind up, being so-called normal drinkers, and some people can use cannabis, you know, in a non-addictive way, and who are at other kinds of addictions. That's everybody has to find their own way. Um, I'm very comfortable with with abstinence myself. I know that any of my and of course we know. I mean, I don't want to preaching to the choir here, but we know that for many of us, there's this problem of, the phenomenon of craving that once we open the door to one drink or one smoke or one whatever, one cookie, that we can't uh, restrain ourselves, that we don't, that we can't work in a kind of, that if we don't have absolute boundaries, we don't have any boundaries. And, and that's just, again, the larger culture might see that as, oh, well, we can help. I'm sure we can find a way. But as I say, abstinence is a beautiful spiritual state. It's again um, it's an again a something that's just in accord with the Dharma. You know, if certainly it's in the precepts. Uh, and I mean, I just I love the obviously you guys know I love the Thai forest tradition, and I I particularly, Ajahn Amaro and Ajahn Sumedho and Ajahn Pasanno. And I've been mentioning, and I will mention it again, that there's a new book called More Than Mindfulness that is on the Abhayagiri website. Maybe we'll look if we can look it up and stick it in the, if somebody wants to look it up and stick it in the chat. Because I just have it on my Kindle. I just downloaded it as an ebook, and it's just, there's something so simple about their approach to spiritual practice that I very much correlate with the simplicity of abstinence and recovery. I feel like my life is just much simpler when I'm not drinking and using. I mean, it's been a long time, but I remember, I can remember those states, those mind states when everything just seemed so messy, and thank you, Vicky and Monica. Um, you know, and again, this comes down to, I don't know if it's again, I know I use that word a lot of times to transition. Um, just that um, this issue of control, you know, and this is the problem with, you know, um, some kind of trying to be moderate. That addicts, alcoholics, like it's hard for us to be moderate, and it requires so much control that it just, to me, it's just so much work, like it's just so much easier to just like, oh, just forget it. Like that I think, uh, uh, you know, I'm sure many of you have this experience. Like there's that moment when I woke up in June of 1985 and I was done. It felt so freeing. And it was very much freeing because I didn't have to worry about it anymore. It was this thing that I was trying to like, and I didn't even realize until that moment how much energy I was spending on trying to manage it all. And um, I found some years ago, I found a diary from 1984. And it was the summer before I got sober. I spent 16 weeks playing at the Sheraton in Anchorage, Alaska. And that was in the summer in Alaska, which means the sun basically never went down, which meant that it was basically a 24-hour party. And if you've ever been to Anchorage, that's what they do in the summer, especially the after hours clubs are open all night, and they're pretty pervasive. And I was really surprised how much this diary talked about my drinking and actually talked about my trying to control it. Like my memory of it is like, yeah, I got drunk a couple times that summer, but it was just like whatever, it was no big thing. I was in a band. No, like it was on my mind. And just to see that and realize, yeah, I was struggling for years trying to control things. And again, this is something people don't understand. And I know people who struggle with trying to get sober don't uh, presume, you know, haven't had this moment of freedom of like, oh God, okay, I don't have to think about that anymore. Now I can just take care of my taxes and take care of the rest of the shit that's really hard to do in my life. You know, okay, and life is complicated enough without like, you know, oh yeah, it's hard to be a human being. Now I'm going to intoxicate myself on a regular basis and try to function and be happy. Like, no, it's like, wow, like you're just making it more difficult for yourself. And of course, we think it's the opposite. And I mean, I guess at some point we do, when we fall into it, we just fall into it as a way of having fun, I guess, most of us. And then, it becomes something else. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate that you guys, I think, I mean, most of you, there might be a face or two that I don't know here, but most of you have been around hanging out with me for a while now, and I appreciate that I don't really have to uh, pretend, that that oh yeah, it could be, yeah, sure, it could be okay if you do this or whatever, if you can manage it, like that's fine if that works for people, but yeah, no thanks. So I just see there a bunch of like comments I want to go back and look at because um I'm just interested to see. I can see that my conversation here did set off some uh, um, other questions or whether observations. What about question and response? Oh, well, is that a question about am I going to let people say something? Is that what you meant, Deborah? Yeah, of course. Uh, I like Monica. I think Kevin's building up to it. Thank, thank you, Monica. That's true. I don't know if I'm building up to it. I just talk until I run out of things to say, and then if there's time left, I'll let you talk. So there exists 12 steps. So I talked about the problem of more. Thank you, Flo. That sums it up, right? The use of psychedelics seems like a shortcut from working through the Eightfold Path. Some very prominent Dharma teachers would disagree, though many would agree. Well, that's a good I think you guys can have a debate about that in the other room. No, I mean, shortcut. Uh, I, I, it doesn't. Yeah, I think it sounds like you mean that in sort of like a not helpful way, like it's not really, or like a skipping working the Eightfold Path. But yeah, I mean, I think of it as something different. I, I do think that the psychedelic experience can be very, obviously, it can be very illuminating. And this is my understanding of what makes it illuminating. Certainly one of the things, one of the key elements of it is it shows you the conditioned nature of perception. That is to say, it shows you that your way of understanding the world and how everything works is just one version. And then psychedelia in the psychedelic experience, you start to see that, oh, that's actually constructed. So that's an insight. And yeah. And I mean, obviously people have, sense of the vastness and emptiness and selflessness, not self, and all those things. People have legitimate spiritual experiences through psychedelics. What the the problem in my mind is that people get attached to that experience and then want to just keep repeating the experience rather than taking the insight that they've learned and living that out, having that really inform their life. And it's kind of like when the meditation retreat wears off and you're like, oh, now I need to go on another meditation retreat because my concentration's gone. That it's like, no, that's missing the point of a meditation retreat. It's not, you're not going on a meditation retreat so you can get your concentration really good so that then when you go home you can really concentrate for a couple months and then you go back and it's the insights are about suffering, impermanence, and not self. They aren't about concentration. Um, it's like what happened with the Washingtonians during the temperance movement. I'm not sure. I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it is. Uh, Okay, you can download the PDF. Each to their own. We go and try it till we find the solution, even if for some of that is death. It's unfortunate. For me, I'm happy with who and what I am in this sort of 12-step Buddhist path. Although I don't say I'm a Buddhist. Yeah, I have no need to seek an alternative. Okay, Kevin offers his teachings freely. I am loving this conversation. I have to bail. Oh, okay, Steve. Um, okay, sorry. Scrolling. Uh, it is still something I take in from the outside to deal with the inside when I should probably be dealing with the inside, the trauma. For some reason, it's like obscuring that word. This is how it isness, yeah. I can tell you I get pretty attached to jhana for a minute. Yeah. So jhana is the deep concentration states, absorption states, a spiritual experience dependent upon an external thing. Nice. Thanks for all those good comments. So, Deborah, did you want to say something? Or did we lose Deborah? Does anybody want to say anything? And I'm not going to run off at the top of the hour in case anybody wants to. Yeah, it looks like we lost Deborah. Hope that wasn't out of resentment. Flo, hi.
I hope it wasn't out of resentment. Hi. Hopefully you can hear me, my earbuds sometimes. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just so happy that this was your topic today. Because it has been, I will celebrate 8 years this month. Um, but it is something where I also teach yoga to to people in recovery and to people in my area. And it is also very prevalent again in the yoga community. It's becoming a
Mhm.
thing. And I hear about it a lot. And it's just interesting. I've talked to my sponsor about it, but I'm always looking for an excuse. My addiction is. And so if someone tells me, oh, you can, you like psychedelics in AA or something like that, for me personally, my experience is like I would look for any excuse. If someone tells me it's going to be okay or I have their okay, I'm going to do it. Or my addiction wants to do it. So I have to remind myself, for me, that I am I love the way you explained abstinence because that made it feel so sacred and special and remind me of how beautiful this life experience can be on the other side with clear perception.
Yeah.
Because I see other people indulging, my family members specifically, my siblings, and they look like they're having a great time. You
Sure.
know, but you remind me that I too can have a beautiful experience without that. So thank you for sharing that today.
Definitely. Thank you. I mean, one of the reasons I won't do psychedelics is that I don't trust my mental stability, frankly. You know, I mean, I just don't, you know. I heard Dan Harris had Spring Washam on, and Spring is a Buddhist teacher from Spirit Rock who takes people to Peru to do ayahuasca, and she was trying to convince him to do it. And he was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't really trust you know, myself because he doesn't identify as in recovery, but he was a cocaine addict. And so, and it was really upsetting to me that this Buddhist teacher was then still pushing, like not respecting his boundary that he said, no, I don't really feel comfortable with that because we know like some people have bad experiences. Anyway, Monica.
I always go back to my something I heard in a meeting years and years ago. I have a disease that tells me I don't have one.
Hmm.
And I also have some neurological damage, and I don't trust myself either for the other stuff. You know, I did plenty of the other stuff in the day, you know, before I got in the rooms, and I want to. I have a great life now, and I feel peaceful, And I'm not, but I'm glad you bring this all up because it's quite a buzz right now. One thing I did hear, and I can't remember, I was listening to 10% Happier, and they were talking about the new research is about on addiction is about harm reduction.
Yeah.
Well, and so they're working on a
Not really new,
plan,
but yeah,
but yeah, but this is
it's
the new
popular
thing.
again. Yes.
Yeah, now this is the new thing of this year or whatever, that's what the missing link why we're not addiction programs are successful and
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
so but I'm glad that this has been good to highlight all of this. I mean,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
well, first of all, I want to say I'm I don't want to sound like some kind of a, plant medicine scold. You know, there are people who use this skillfully and have beneficial results from it, and that's beautiful. That's there's, I'm partly just talking about myself, and because I'm a very cautious person. This is one of the things I've realized. It's odd to realize it at my old age, but maybe I've become more cautious. But so I'm very attuned to risks, but I don't want to like come off as like, ah, you did that. Well, then you're not really blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I know there are people who could, I mean, my friend who was talking about who was involved in the psychedelic research and stuff, like he's a good friend. And we talk and I watched him go through this and I respect what he did. He was a cocaine addict and stayed abstinence for a long time, for some, like probably a decade, and then started experimenting with psychedelics and did it in a pretty prolific way, but he never relapsed on alcohol or cocaine. And, it's been like a process. And I've watched him through that and I see, okay, you know, you've you've been careful. You haven't harmed yourself. There's been some behavior that was not ideal, but we all have that. And so I don't want to act like a scold about it. I just like to point out, I mean, by and large, what I'm interested in is the general idea of the culture looking for a fix and looking for the answer and doing research and like then, as you said, harm reduction. Again, like harm reduction is really valuable for at a certain stage. And it's got this huge risk. So, as long as you enter into things like that with a broad view and understand what's going on so that you catch if the risks start to overwhelm the positives with an individual, that you're like, okay, this isn't working. You need to do abstinence, like you're not able to because harm reduction makes sense. Like, yeah, give people clean needles, give them a place to live, help them to get off the street and start to get to a point where they could contemplate abstinence. For myself, I recognize that my bottom was 3 years before I got sober, but my life was too much of a mess for me to think about abstinence. It was only when I got my life together enough that I had a job and a place to live and sort of, things like that, food, that I could think about, oh, maybe the alcohol and drugs thing is, are keeping me from progressing further. So just to recognize that there are different aspects of these things. I'm not at all trying to draw some kind of red line around either psychedelics or harm reduction. But as you say, this idea that so often it's like, oh, we're going to discredit the 12 steps by showing that harm reduction is really the way. It's like, there's many ways, there's many people with many different types of issues and that are going to respond to different things. And when we just try to apply, that's what the problem with the 12 steps in the fundamentalist 12-step world, it's either do the 12 steps or you die, and it's like, no, that's not true. There's lots of people who have found other ways. And that's okay, but then let's not go, well, if you do the 12 steps, then you're going to die or whatever. They're no good. It's like, no, that's stupid. Come on. A lot of subtlety gets lost in the world, doesn't when things become and of course, as I say, journalists are what are they trying when they write an article, what are they trying to do? Well, that writer is trying to get their article published and hoping that a lot of people will read it. Now, how are they going to do that? By writing stuff that stirs people up. So their bottom line, I mean, God bless journalists, but the bottom line, the bottom line is money. Now, obviously, a good journalist is in it because they want to get information out there, but they're under pressure that if they just tell boring stories about like, well, if you just different ways that could work for different people, but nobody cares. But if they come out and say, this doesn't work and that AA has got problems and, everybody should take LSD, then they get clicks, right? All right, sorry. Kevin's cynicism is coming out. I'm amazed that there are people still here. It's after 11. Any other comments anybody wanted to make? Nice to see some smiles. At least I've gotten some smiles out of you guys this morning. Anne, go ahead.
Yes, very thought-provoking. And I can't help but think about Bill Wilson, who 20 years of sobriety or something, I don't know, but he's in the 50s.
Yeah.
And he took LSD and he wrote about it. And he said it was incredibly, it had long-lasting effects in terms of his depression.
Yeah.
And just the research it's very nascent, but the research on trauma and the clinical trials on MDMA
Mhm.
in a clinical setting, I'm talking about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy.
Right. Right.
There's just there's just a lot there. So, but I just want to thank you for
No, that's
thinking
right.
about Bill Wilson.
And
yeah.
the problem, of course, is that when you tell a drug addict
Right.
or an alcoholic, when the headline is psychedelics help addiction, and they don't think, oh, maybe I could get into one of these clinical trials. They think, where can I score some MDMA, and
Yeah.
and or even, oh, well, this justifies my behavior. Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
see that? Did you see that at CIIS they're training people in holotropic breath work
Yeah.
in order to train them to do psychedelic assisted therapy? Because since the drugs aren't legal in California, they can, and the best way to get people into a psychedelic or whatever altered state is through the holotropic breath work. And it's like mimics the acid experience. It's weird.
Yeah.
Abigail, do you have your hand up there in the
I did have my hand up.
okay.
I was just thinking about Timothy Leary and Baba Ram Dass,
Yeah.
who stood out the same place. One of them took the path that we're taking and became wonderful and died blissfully, as far as I can tell. The other one ended up in a prison for the criminally insane.
Oh, really? I didn't realize Leary was
That's
like,
yeah.
I thought he like died, like, didn't he die online or something? I thought he was gonna have like a,
I was trying to remember how he died, but
yeah.
I can't remember. No, he was yeah, and the same drug, those two paths were so dramatically opposite.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm I'm not saying that Baba Ram Dass is good and Timothy Leary was bad. It's just simply that was the path they were on.
Yeah.
It wasn't the LSD. It was the path they were on.
Yeah.
There, my 2 cents.
Okay. Monica, you're double dipping. Is that the story?
I know it's double dipping time. My son is an expert in fungi,
Oh,
and he was really prodding me to sign up for the MDMA, which is ecstasy. I mean, it's not that difficult to find, I don't think, um, but I was full disclosure. You know, I passed with addiction. I have brain injury and all that, and they turned me down. So, you know, so I
oops.
mean, I was relieved actually, because I felt like I was being kind of prodded into it,
Hmm.
and I wasn't sure about it, and um they turned me down, so they didn't qualify. So, you know, full disclosure, if you're gonna try to go down that for a clinical trial, you know.
Hmm. I'm not, but thank you.
Okay, good
Hello,
to know.
John. I think this
Hi,
should
how
be
are
our
you?
last, this will be our last comment here.
And it might be something to revisit when there's more time, but I participated in the Recovery Dharma event that you helped close.
Ah,
And we were talking about a moment in our sitting practice when something opens up and we can kind of see, maybe through a glass darkly, the process of impermanence and rebirth, or whatever names you want to give to it. And the word that was getting bantered around in that conversation was impersonal. And since I've listened to that, and I've heard it 1,000 times, but for some reason it struck me. The other words that were getting bantered around were words like sangha and loving kindness and compassion and everything that's not impersonal. And it seems to me that, first of all, in terms of harm reduction, I've watched some NIH and National Institutes of Health documentaries about the effects of things like ecstasy. And people who have abused it have the minds of, we're talking 16, 20-year-olds, have the minds of 70-year-old people.
hmm,
The spaces open up around the center of their brain.
hmm.
So I don't know, there's that aspect of it that would probably need to be looked into more.
Yeah.
But I would find that instead of allowing me to connect in a fully human way with other people who are trying to connect in a fully human way with one another and with life, it seems the hard work is the work that has to be done. And so in terms of, that the extremes of love and impersonality, I'm still going to give that some thought, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Those are some of the things that I've been thinking about and some of the things that came to me today. So thank you for letting me put
Okay.
that out there.
Thanks for chiming in, John. Appreciate it. It's a nice note to end on. The hard work and the loving kindness is what I heard there. So yeah, so I appreciate everybody showing up and hanging out. Obviously, I didn't, as usual, didn't have a plan. And so interesting that this non-plan triggered some quite engagement. So interesting, guys. As I said, Friday night is my Spirit Rock class, so hope that people will show up for that. I'll probably have more of a plan for Friday night, and other than that, you know, have a great week and take care of yourselves. Don't drink or use no matter what, unless you're, practicing harm reduction. Then it's your business. Okay, sorry.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kevin.
All
Thanks,
right. Bye.
Kevin.